Good evening, everyone. If you don't know, you should know. My name is Rameez and I am a filmmaker and a film critic. And today's film is 1983's Scarface.
Al Pacino is Scarface. He loved the American dream with a vengeance. Al Pacino, Scarface.
Now, this isn't one of my favorite films, but I know a lot of people who consider this to be one of their favorite films, and I know a lot of people, including my teachers, who consider it to be a terrible film, and I understand why they would say that. This film, if you think about it, was The Wolf of Wall Street 30 years ago. Just take out the stock market element from The Wolf of Wall Street and it's basically Scarface. And like The Wolf of Wall Street, everything is cranked up to 11. There are no breaks in between for the audience to take a breath. But I am going to state my reasons as to why I enjoyed this film. One of them is Al Pacino's insanely good performance. Now, Al Pacino's not a person who has a limited range of good performances. He has Vincent Hanna in Heat. He was Lowell Bergman in The Insider. He was the devil in The Devil's Advocate and Serpico, The Godfather. The list goes on and on, but let's be honest, when people think Al Pacino, the first thing they think of is Scarface. Is it a good performance or is it just a fun performance to watch? Well, let me tell you this. I lived in Miami for 5.5 years. Now, albeit I didn't live in the 80s, I lived in the 2000s. The people haven't changed as much in Miami, especially in the places this film took place in. And Tony Montana sounds and acts just like a Cuban who came off of the boat. And by the way, completely irrelevant point, but Cuban women, mwah. They're loud, but they're oh so caring. Al Pacino's performance as Antonio Montana is incredible. His wit, his grit, and his charm make him a likable performance. And most importantly, his eyes. The eyes, they don't lie, chico. His facial expressions might not show anger, but his eyes do. So yes, it is indeed a good performance, and a performance that deserves to be called one of his best, if not the best. Also, the subtext and the allure of the American dream and the accomplishment and lack of substance in the American dream is not just eye-opening, but it's also terrifying. All Tony Montana wanted was a good life. He got it, and he lost it. This would make a great biographical film if Tony Montana was an actual person, but since he's not, it's just a great testament to Oliver Stone's writing, since Tony Montana feels like a real person. By the way, Oliver Stone wrote this film while he was fighting off a cocaine addiction, and the final name, his last name of Montana, Tony Montana, came from his favorite football player named Joe Montana. This feels more like an Oliver Stone film than it feels like a Brian De Palma film, who is the director of this film. Oliver Stone is notorious for giving information overload. He succeeded with that formula in JFK, which to this day is my favorite film of his. But he's just as efficient as introducing many ideas and plot points and not making them feel overloaded. That was the beauty of JFK. And it's just as good as in Scarface as well. For example, like right after the massacre on Ocean Drive, Tony meets with Frank Lopez, played by an equally good Robert Loggia. We are introduced with a new character, the love interest of this film, and we are foreshadowed with a death in the same scene. When Frank asks, "Who would want to kill me?" Tony's friend nervously looks over at Tony. That is a mark of a good scene, which advances plot and character. And again, our characters are three-dimensional in this film. Tony at the beginning doesn't really care about materialism, but he understands the system of life to an extent. So in order to impress a woman, he becomes a vapid consumer himself. Of course, his downfall is also thanks to a woman, of course, but that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is this script feels real and it doesn't feel like it's following a formula. Brian De Palma's influence comes in the tone of the film. Just the way every character glares at each other in this film, just the way everyone gives long speeches and pauses numerous times in their speeches, that is total Brian De Palma. A good friend of mine, a fellow filmmaker of mine back in Miami, Mike Clowney, if you're watching this, I miss you, buddy, but he said that no one builds tension better than Brian De Palma. He was right about that when Brian De Palma got to The Untouchables. However, you do see a pattern emerge of some sort in Scarface. The time period is fairly accurate, but timeless as well. If you go down Ocean Drive right now, it looks almost the same, but you see the same scum walking the streets of Ocean Drive as well. That one scene captures the allure of Miami back then and even now. Ever wonder why things look so pretty in Miami? Well, because 60% of all buildings are a front for something. The cinematography and costume design is awesome. It's colorful, but it also changes with the character. In the beginning of this film, we see Tony Montana wear white, light, bright colors. At the end of the film, we see him dressed in a black suit, black shirt. It goes with the character, and the film also knows how to use slow motion to good effect, not just to make things look cool, but to provide a heightened dramatic effect. Just watch the final scene with Tony and Manolo. However, the audio portion of this film is rather lousy if you ask me. The sound mixing is atrocious. It's like film school sound mixing. That's something I would mix. Whenever there's a scene where they're in a club where the music is supposed to be loud, it's understandable why the music is loud, but it's not understandable as to why it trumps the dialogue. Dialogue is king when it comes to mixing sound. The room tone also is clearly not mixed or lowered in gain, and you can hear that come across in some of the silent scenes of the film. If you guys don't know what room tone is, this is room tone. It's literally the tone of the room. So that's not mixed in really well at all. You hear that pretty dominant. And the reason I'm not giving this film a pass for bad sound mixing is because Blade Runner came out a year before this, and the first Alien movie came out 4 years before this. So there's no excuse for a film like this, at this time and age, to have bad sound mixing. But that's literally it, man. This is a very fun film, and it's a very massive and expansive film. You are captivated by watching Tony Montana rise and fall. This film is about the rise and falls of every character except for Sosa. I love the modern day woman subplot featured around Elvira, played by the great Michelle Pfeiffer. It's such a depressing character to watch. It's just another smart woman who cannot take her own advice, which leads to her downfall. This is a film that asks you, the viewer, to come on in, sit down, and enjoy the ride. This film is so much more fun if you watch it for the first time, and it is far superior to the film I mentioned earlier on in this review, The Wolf of Wall Street. I am giving this film a final score, a 4 out of 5. It is a must-watch if you have not seen Scarface. As usual, people, thank you so much for watching. It really means a ton. Apart from that, people, if you want to converse with me, add me on Twitter and Snapchat. It's the same username. Until next time, however, I will see you again. Remember to love yourselves.